Before Fortnite, before PUBG, there was the Culling, a battle royale title developed by Xaviant that aimed to capture the most Hunger Games-esque aspects of the battle royale market. With a strong focus on customization, traps, and melee combat, the Culling's approach to the market was quite unique, as was the seemingly tongue-in-cheek decor and aura surrounding the game.
Hunt and kill each other!
But despite coming out of nowhere and having quite the successful early access launch, over the course of the next year, the Culling seemed to continuously fumble what success it had. How did a game so well-liked go from the top of the Steam and Twitch charts to allowing their game to be bought when practically the only thing players could play against was bots? In this episode of Death of a Game, we will uncover the truth behind the Culling's quick death. The Culling has a special place reserved in my heart. The game had charm in spades, it never took itself seriously, and with the sheer amount of possibilities in the game, it made every new game feel unique and exciting. Nostalgia and feelings aside though, the story starts quite abruptly. Xaviant, the developer located in Georgia, had launched their first game, Lichdom Battle Mage, in 2014, and although the game wasn't fleshed out enough to have long-term appeal, it had some fun and unique aspects of the game, such as its strong focus on physics-based magic. Lichdom might not have been a mega success, but it was successful enough for people to be excited to check out what the fledgling company Xaviant had planned in their next outing. The Culling was playable in early 2016 in the form of a closed beta. The early access launch happened on March 6, 2016, likely in a move to gather funding while developing their game, like most everyone else does in the early access market. Xaviant chose to do an early access launch with the Culling, pricing their title at a fair price of $15. The response for the launch was quite electric.
Ew, he just threw up on his shoes.
Peaking at over 12,000 concurrent players, the Culling found itself on the top most played charts on Steam. Although it was clear that the game was early in its developmental phases, people were having a good time playing a unique take on the battle royale genre, lauding aspects of the game such as its tongue-in-cheek announcer.
This isn't a game. It's a game show!
The amount of specialization that you could choose for your particular playstyle, and the overall brutal nature of being one of the 16 contestants stuck on an island full of destructive weaponry, explosives, well, and lots of poison. In order to track the Culling's demise, it's best to track their patches in junction with their drop in player counts on the Steam charts. Starting with its second patch, a week after early access launch, and as promised, the Culling released its second patch. The main thing here that annoyed the community was nerfing thrown weapons' ability to backstab, which, as fans exclaimed, made running away more common. March 29th, 2016, however, is the patch that you really started to see cracks being formed. This is an infamous patch even, where Xaviant balanced weapon power and speeds. What ended up happening after this change was combat being slowed down tremendously, a combat that, while fun, clearly had its limitations and was not meant for long or heavy engagements, say like Chivalry Medieval Warfare. So when the gameplay was slowed down, it demonstrated already present issues with the Culling's engine, as well as their combat mechanics. Sure, the game was suffering from poor optimization since launch and technical issues that were affecting some of its audience. It wasn't until the combat and the Culling started to be changed that you ultimately saw the largest pushback. Some gameplay changes just seemed bizarre when you consider the combat changes. For example, they made healing twice as expensive and yet weakened weapons by speed and power. This meant that you no longer could kill somebody quick, which made each early game engagement that much more risky because it took twice as much to heal. Not to mention, if you got jumped by more than one person, it's not like you could reliably kill one person quickly, so it also took a lot of skill away from the game. Now you can't knock Xaviant for trying, of course they have to try to balance their game, and trying is absolutely what they did. With the next patch in April, Xaviant tried to fix what balance issues they created with their previous patch, but the changes missed the mark. They increased weapon speeds, which were now overturned, especially in conjunction with latency issues present on the server due to the way that blocking would now register. Pushing became the thing to do, and fights devolved to just push fests. Due to no ping lock servers, nor region lock servers, an already latency-based game system really started to show its flaws when they changed the way combat flowed. You could have people from different regions playing on the NA server because they didn't have their own server, and because this was not blocked in any sort of way, probably because they didn't have any other servers for the game to run on, you had severe latency issues, which just made the combat that much worse.
How the fuck does that not connect?
Xaviant also chose to essentially remove the whole stealth playstyle, which I attribute to them creating a poor combat system with the new changes that were coming, and kind of saw stealth having too much of an issue, probably to do with the whole spamming thing. If you could just stealth jump somebody and spam really quickly, it's probably too OP. By the end of April 2016, the Culling had lost half of its population. A good portion of those players were likely leaving due to consistently poor performance and optimization issues, as well as Xaviant continuing to change core combat in a not fully launched game. Rather than continue to go through all of the changes, we can now just focus on the largest ones. Near the end of 2016, population was below 4 digits up until the start of the new year. The Big House patch came in January of 2017, and it added progression leveling, new weapons, and new game modes. All things that the game surely needed, but the combat was still broke, and it was becoming more and more broke. Now blocking wouldn't stagger an opponent, which meant that fights devolved into just swinging endlessly on your opponent, which, as mentioned before, still rewards the person that has the better ping. Ranked game modes finally came in July of 2017, something most people probably glossed over, especially due to how little players are playing at the time. Not having a ranked game mode for over a year is such a crucial mistake I have seen multiple games make. The reason this is such an issue is if you have a combat system that very much rewards skilled play and is quite deep, if you don't properly separate players by their skill levels, you will have people quitting the game in a frustrated state. On both sides of the spectrum, you have the noob who's tired of being killed by all of the pro players and just wants to have some fun with people against his own skill level.
You just got killed with a spear!
And then you have the pros getting bored of beating up on lower skilled players. But this is especially problematic in the Culling, because the Culling was an inherently brutal game, one that rewarded players of all sorts of skills due to the sheer amount of options at early access launch. Having a skilled and deep combat system is a great thing to have, but it quickly becomes a problem if match consistency and quality varies so greatly. Not getting a consistent experience is a crucial reason that multiplayer games bleed players. The ranked changes came too late, which I attribute to being a large problem for the Culling. But the largest issue that started as an issue and was still an issue was the combat was still not working. Xaviant tried at numerous occasions to balance the combat, but the players just kept asking for them to just revert back to 1.0's combat, the combat that the game essentially launched with. All of these issues compounding, as the Culling's population count reached as low as 61 players, Xaviant pushed the Culling to launch on the Xbox One, probably hoping to capture a new audience. They would be able to pay their bills or at least help them fix the game enough to have more than 61 players playing on the PC. I understand them wanting to capture the console audience, but I take it them porting from PC to Xbox One certainly took resources. Resources that were probably better spent on optimizing their games and fixing the game in the first place. It doesn't matter how many platforms you launch on. If you don't fix your core game, people aren't going to buy the game. When a prospective buyer looks at the player charts and sees that only 61 players or less are playing the game, they're not going to want to play. So maybe you should fix your game before you just try and launch it on a bunch of different platforms like that somehow will fix any of your issues. The PC numbers, they never improved, but Xaviant continued to, at this point doing the motions, launch the Culling October 6th, 2017, a year and 7 months after first being playable. The launch had zero buzz. Even Xaviant themselves seemed to bury the launch within a diary patch notes of sorts. The game was now dipping below 48 players, and then 2 months after launch, after near radio silence from Xaviant, they announced that they were halting the development of the Culling. After more than 2 years dedicated to making the Culling, it's time to announce that Xaviant has begun work on a new title. Despite having grown our tiny team into a slightly larger team of 20 developers, this means that our entire focus is now on our new project. There are no future updates planned for the Culling. Xaviant just threw in the towel. That's really how it seemed to me. They didn't even seem committed to their own game's launch. I couldn't even find press announcements about the Culling's launch as an example of this. There was zero buzz around its launch, and that blame is large in part on Xaviant's lap. Sure, they had to move on to a new project when they realized that the Culling wasn't going to pay their bills, but Xaviant was good at creating a new and fresh idea, and just seemingly poor at implementing the idea, or at least properly balancing. They're quite notorious at taking their game, putting it out there, it has some level of success, and then they never continue iterating on the game. As of the time of this video, the Culling has had as low as 7 players concurrently, It's targeted probably to shut down any month, and Xaviant has confirmed that they are moving on away from the project, so the hearse is already on its way. We know that the Culling's ever struggle with its combat, and its late-coming rank system severely hurt the game. We have the Steam metrics to prove all of this. But there's something else at play here, something we have mentioned in other videos. Xaviant with the Culling seem to have no clue how to balance their game, and in large part, this comes from them lacking a strong in-house testing team. They were extremely reliant on their players to test things out, and that's not really a risk you can afford to take. Because if changes don't work on a live server, well then, like what happened to the Culling in May of 2016, you lose more than half of your population. That population becomes jaded.
And today I just want to talk about how broken the combat system in the game Culling is.
And it's unlikely that they want to stick through the game anymore. Strong in-house testing is not often mentioned as a reason a game fails or succeeds, but it's not something that we should overlook, especially in the case of the Culling. You need the right kind of testers, the ones who can really push the level of the game. If Xaviant had even just a few of these, how could they ever let push spam become such a big problem? Or even think that taking out stagger on the block was a good idea? These are all things that could be tested quite quickly. A theory of mine regarding Xaviant is simply that they suffer from high-res syndrome. A syndrome where a developer creates a game that was not particularly a game that they created for longevity, or at least maybe never had that in mind. They abandon the game when things get rough and decide to move on to funding the next project. Notice how a mere 2 years after Lichdom Battlemage, Xaviant's first project, you had the early access launch of the Culling. I'm almost positive that the project that they are currently working on, which is not announced yet, started being developed before Culling's blood was even dried out yet. Xaviant likely had already chosen to move on to the next project before the Culling had even died. And although I don't completely curse such a thing, as it's important to know when to cut your losses and to move on to your next project, especially if that next project is the future of your company, but when you have a history of continuing to move on to the next project, eventually, people will get fed up and stop buying your games, because they don't trust you to stick around for the long haul, to see the games out. Now, I could be wrong here, this is my theory after all, but it's a shame that the Culling wasn't given its best chance for success, because I personally found the game quite unique, not because of its tongue-in-cheek nature, but also because it inherently seemed more of like a battle arena game of sorts. Instead of diversity being shaped around gun types that you picked up off the ground, such as a battle royale like Fortnite or PUBG, the Culling was based on your traits and your drop crate. So you could create a number of builds, almost as if the Culling was some sort of RPG battle royale of sorts. Maybe that's why I liked it so much. Well, and then there's always moments like this.
You just killed the funk out of them. I mean, literally, your funk balance went up when they died. Just saying.
Or like this.
Do you have the guts to survive?
Anyway, thanks for watching, guys.
Guess what? That guy did not survive. That guy is definitely dead. So dead.